What's up guys? Today we will be going over the Greataxe, a weapon that tears apart the competition when it comes to area of effect, or AOE for short. It will be an amazing weapon for PvE and possibly a must-have for content like fast clearing expeditions due to its ability to make quick work of multiple enemies at once. For the Greataxe, we will be focusing on its damage and why its AOE abilities are a cut above the rest. Later we will get into the weapons that I think will make an amazing pair with the Greataxe, the sword and shield for high damage tanking, and the hatchet that gives you unbelievable amounts of damage and tons of up close abilities that will make you want to just run straight into the fight and rip everything apart. So now let's get into the Greataxe and its abilities that will make it so good at cleaving down groups of enemies. The Greataxe is a melee weapon that scales solely from strength. It has two skill trees called Reaper and Mauler. Reaper focuses on single target damage with a little self-healing and has a taunt for tanking. And aside from the taunt and a few passive abilities, it doesn't offer anything to boost our AoE potential, but we will cover it nonetheless. And the Mauler tree focuses on AoE damage and a fair amount of crowd control. This tree is what really sets the Greataxe apart from the crowd. First, let's look at the Reaper tree, its abilities and passives that will help us pump out damage. The first ability is Charge, where you charge 10 meters, dealing 130% weapon damage when you reach the target, or press left mouse button. This ability has Unstoppable, which means the attack can't be interrupted. The second ability is Reap, where you extend your axe 5 meters, pulling foes towards you, and dealing 107% weapon damage. This ability also has a taunt for 4 seconds if you have a Carnelian gem equipped in your Greataxe, which has 3 passives of note. The first is the Collector, where Reap range is increased to 8 meters. The second is Hunger. You heal yourself for 30% of the damage done by Reap. The third is Fatal Attraction. After you pull with Reap, you do a spin attack, dealing 122% weapon damage. This ability is the only tank ability on the Greataxe. The reason I think the Greataxe will be an excellent tank weapon with high damage is this ability, because it lets you pull enemies right to you, locking them in range for all your other AoE abilities, which we will get into soon. Now, the third ability is Execute, a powerful overhead attack dealing 175% weapon damage. Execute deals 30% more damage versus foes under 50% health. There are 4 notable passives on this tree that pair really well with stacking up multiple enemies and helping you self-heal a massive amount of health. The first is called Greed, where light attacks from the Greataxe give 10% damage for 5 seconds, which stacks up to 3 for a total of 30% damage. The second is Critical Gains. Critical hits from the Greataxe heal you for 10% of the damage dealt. The third is Keen Edge. Critical damage is increased by 15%. The fourth is Critical Condition, where Greataxe attacks against enemies below 50% health crit 15% more often. These passives are insane. If you go with a build that offers a little more crits, if you do a massive pull, you might be able to out-heal the damage with all of your crits. Now, before we get into the tree with all the AoE damage, if you haven't already considered subscribing, I'll be making more videos just like this, and they will get even better after launch. You guys have been supporting me a ton, and I thank you all. So now, let's get into the Mauler tree. And I think you guys will start to see why this weapon might be the best when it comes to AoE content. The first ability is Whirlwind, a spin attack dealing 50% weapon damage to all nearby foes. If you hit a foe, spin again, with a maximum of 4 spins, you can move while spinning. This attack cannot critical hit, which has 3 passives of note. The first is called Gusting Winds. Whirlwind's maximum number of rotations is increased to 7. The second is Unending Winds, Whirlwind's movement speed is increased by 50%. The third is Surrounded. If you have 3 or more foes around you, deal 30% more damage. A devastating ability. While it doesn't have a ton of upfront damage, with the 50% damage, it quickly scales when you can spin up to 7 times and gain 30% more damage. The next ability is Maelstrom, a fast spinning attack that pulls targets closer to you, dealing 115% weapon damage, with 2 passives of note, the first being Storm's Reach. Extend the reach of Maelstrom's pull range by 50%, and the second being No Reprieve. Maelstrom does an extra spin attack, pulling in foes and dealing 115% weapon damage. The next ability is Gravity Well. Throw an axe to create a vortex that pulls foes to its center for 3 seconds. Ends with a damaging burst, dealing 100% weapon damage with a range of 10 meters. With 2 passives of note. The first is called Crowded. Increase burst damage by 10% for each foe caught in the vortex. And the second is Unyielding. Allies gain 20% Fortify while standing in your well. Fortify reduces the damage taken. These abilities all combined offer an insane amount of AoE damage, along with the abilities to keep targets locked into the fight with you, making it very easy for your entire team to stack AoEs on top of the enemies, giving you extremely fast clear speeds. There's 4 passives on this tree that boost the damage even higher. The first is Heavy Pull, where your heavy attacks pull enemies closer to you. The second is Revenge, where blocking a attack with a Greataxe gives 5% damage for 5 seconds, and can stack up to 3 times. The third is Center of Attention. While holding the Greataxe, you gain 10% damage when 3 or more enemies are within 4 meters of you. And the fourth is Muller's Fury. Greataxe attacks increase damage by 5% for 3 seconds and can stack up to 10. So if we combine the Greed and Frustration passives from the Reaper tree with the passive damage boosts I just read, you get a total of 110% extra damage if you manage to do everything to stack each passive, and a total of 140% if you stack it with Surrounded from the Whirlwind ability. That is absolutely insane amounts of damage, and these passives stack off simple things like blocking attacks, landing light attacks, or just standing close to enemies, making it very easy to get that full benefit. I'm sure you see why I think the Greataxe will be the best for AoE content like massive pulls and expeditions, or pulling a bunch of enemies in open world to power level. There's simply no other weapon that competes with it. Now, let's get into the weapon combos I think will be amazing with the Greataxe, and one pair that I didn't list here is the Ice Gauntlet. Because the Ice Gauntlet has so much CC and utility, it's a great pair with almost every weapon, and I don't want to put it in every video. But if you want to know more about the Ice Gauntlet, you can check out my video going over all that it has to offer. It's a crazy weapon. So now let's look at the Sword and Shield, as I feel it will match the Greataxe perfectly for tanking because it has the ability to add more AoE damage along with a ton of survivability. When things get out of hand, it will be a good panic weapon. The Sword and Shield scale from Strength with a side stat of Dexterity. There's 2 trees called Swordmaster and Defender. The first tree we will look at is the Swordmaster tree, which has one ability of note for this video. It's called Whirling Blade. Deal 145% weapon damage to all foes within 2 meters, which has 2 passives of note that give 20% reduced armor to enemies and 10% cooldown reduction for each enemy hit. This is a good ability to have to help stack damage while you have everything grouped up. Now let's look at the Defender tree and its 3 abilities and notable passives. The first ability is Shield Bash. Deal 50% weapon damage and stun foes in front of you for 2 seconds. And it's also Taunt Gem compatible, with 2 passives of note that increase threat and give 100% more damage, and another that increases the stun by 1 second. This ability is amazing, as it will allow you to stun multiple enemies at once as long as they're in front of you. And with Intimidating Bash, you get 100% more damage while they're stunned. Now, the second ability is Shield Rush. Rush forward at 5 meters, knocking back foes and dealing 125% weapon damage. With one passive of note that hits enemies within 5 meters with a 10% weaken for 4 seconds that reduces damage. And the third ability is Final Stand. For 8 seconds, all damage is reduced by 30%, and it's also Taunt Gem compatible. There's 2 passives of note that give 20% damage reduction, and another that heals 15% of your maximum health. This ability, paired with Weaken from the Shield Rush, will give you plenty of time to get healed up, and it will be very hard to die with these 2 abilities, making it to where you can pull absolutely massive groups with a Greataxe without fear of dying. Now for the next weapon, and I think this might be my go-to for raw damage output in things like Expeditions. It's the Greataxe and Hatchet. The Hatchet is a melee weapon that scales off strength, with a side stat of dexterity. It has 2 trees, Berserker and Throwing. And for this video, we will be throwing the Throwing tree into the trash and focusing on Berserker. So let's take a look at some of the abilities and passives. The first ability is Feral Rush, a sprint melee attack that causes the player to leap forward, hitting twice. The first hit deals 100% and the second 2 deal 115% weapon damage. The second ability is Berserk, and this is the reason we want this weapon. Berserk increases all damage done by 20% while active. Berserk mode will be active for 15 seconds. The reason this ability is so nasty is because you get the benefits from active abilities even when you weapon swap, keeping the damage bonus for all 15 seconds, which is insane. There's 4 passives of note that all get carried over on weapon swap that grant 20% movement speed, 30% heal based on your maximum health, all crowd control will be removed on activation, and all attacks are uninterruptible and you cannot be staggered. A absolutely insane ability, and it has a base cooldown of 15 seconds, so you will have this for almost every enemy pool. The next and final ability is Raging Torrent. Perform 4 fast attacks, each dealing 80% weapon damage, and with 1 passive that gives 20% haste for 6 seconds, allowing you to move faster. There's a few amazing passives on this tree that give 10% damage for every enemy within 5 meters of the player, with no cap, and another called Defy Death, where when you receive lethal damage, your health is reduced to 0, and you gain immortality for 4 seconds. This weapon combo is extremely good, with amazing damage. It allows you to stick to any target, and not be interrupted or staggered. And it's simple as well. No need to juggle weapons back and forth the entire fight. All you need to do is swap to the Hatchet and pop Berserk, and swap back. I hope I was able to show you guys why the Greataxe might be the best weapon for AOE damage. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, keep an eye out. There will be more just like this, as well as other topics on New World in the future. I'll see you guys there, and as always guys, have a good one.